Well, good evening, everybody. I've got straight up 6 o'clock Alaska time. If everybody signs on that's registered for the program, we'll have more than 250 people in this meeting tonight. Well, my name is Steve Brown, and I'm the Matsu Copper River District Agriculture Agent. I created Chicken University when I first got to Alaska years ago because I noticed so many people's flocks were missing their toes due to frostbite. And so we put together this cold weather chicken program. But before we get started, let's take care of some housework. First, let me ask everybody to please mute your audio so that we don't get to hear you making dinner wherever you're at. Second thing, this presentation is being recorded. We will have, if you email me, I can make the presentation available to you tomorrow, but we will be posting it up on our YouTube channel in a couple of days. I would also encourage you to mute your video.
No.
The reason you mute your video is that speeds up the bandwidth connection for everybody. And I would encourage you to get something to write with, because at the very end, I'm going to have my email address and my phone number. I almost regret to give it to you because we had a program last night with 150 people on, and I had about 150 emails waiting for me this morning. So anyway, we'll let the people who are figuring Zoom out for the first time a few more minutes to get on here. And I want to tell you about that chicken that's perched on my shoulder there in the title slide. If you're not seeing the picture, it's because the video screens are covering up and you can just move those videos over. That is the most famous rooster in Alaska. And his name, he's no longer with us, but his name was Khan, because that year we were naming our chickens after Star Trek characters. Anyway, Khan has been on the cover of every single newspaper in the state. And at one point, he even had his own chicken radio call-in talk show on NPR. So anyway, I just wanted to introduce you to Khan. And my wife and I run Denali Dreams Farm. This is our farm logo here. I'm very much into mountaineering, so this is a hen sitting on the nest daydreaming about climbing Denali. Okay, so let's get started. Why keep chickens? Okay, there's a lot of positives for it. A lot of people like to know where their egg and meat are coming from. If you've never had homegrown eggs before, you can never go back to store-bought eggs. It's hard for me to eat eggs in restaurants because they don't seem to have any taste and seem kind of thin. Probably because your hens will have a more varied diet. They'll have much higher nutrients, well, just better flavor. Oh, and let me remind everybody to please mute their audio. So when you have chickens, you've also got the best supply of a garden fertilizer around. It's a great learning experience for adults, but especially kids. And one of the things I like to say is chickens' social lives are very interesting. I've thought about writing a soap opera on what goes on in the coop. I think it would probably be better than any soap opera that's on TV right now. Well, for all the positives there are about keeping chickens, there's just as many negatives. Most likely, unless you live in the Alaskan bush, raising your own eggs and raising your own chickens for meat is going to be more expensive than what you can buy in the store. However, because of the pandemic, people have become more concerned about food security, so a lot of people are getting into raising chickens for the first time. Chickens need daily care. You can't just give them some food and water and go away on a 2-week vacation. Chickens smell, especially a wet chicken, so you're going to have odor issues. Roosters don't just crow in the morning, they crow around the clock. I've been out in my yard at 3 in the morning and heard one of my roosters going at it. Chickens are also potential vector for diseases, okay, when they come in contact with wild birds. And finally, bears, wolves, dogs, all kinds of predators love chicken, okay? And if you get a bear that discovers that you've got chicken, he'll be back many, many times. So this romantic notion of free range chickens that aren't fenced up, those are just chickens looking for a place to die. Okay, so you've decided you want to raise chickens. The first thing you've got to ask yourself is, what is the purpose of your flock? Is it for egg production? Is it for meat production? Do you want to try to win something at the state fair with an exotic breed? I know we have quite a few people here from around the country tonight, but I'm speaking directly to the Alaskans. If you want to win a ribbon at the Alaska State Fair, don't enter the fair in Palmer. Enter the Kenny Lake Fair, because it's pretty much the same 3 chickens every year. And if a new chicken comes along, it's automatic grand champion. Okay, assuming you're from Alaska or some other cold environment, do know that not all breeds do well in Alaska. Okay, generally speaking, any chicken breed that's got leghorn in its name, like white leghorn, that chicken will not do well in cold environments because they just don't have enough body mass. They're great egg layers, okay, but they can't handle the cold. Again, let me remind everybody to be sure and mute your audio. Okay, some good egg producers that I recommend that lay more than 200 eggs a year, almost an egg a day when they're, less than a year old. Rhode Island Reds are good, Barred Plymouth Rocks, New Hampshires, but especially for cold environments, a breed called Chanticleers. Chanticleers were bred by a priest in Quebec to be especially cold tolerant. Do know that if you're going to buy your chicks now, it's going to be 5 to 6 months before they begin laying. So sometimes it's a good idea to wait until the fall, when the people thought starting a flock in May was a good idea, and then realize as we're going into the winter months, this may not be as much fun as I thought of. So you can get a flock of new hens that someone else is paid to feed out until they get old enough to lay eggs. So here's some pictures of those. There on the far left is a Rhode Island Red, a very common flock, very good for meat, very good for eggs. Personality-wise, I think they tend to be a little snobbish. Right next to it there is the Barred Rock. I think Barred Rocks are some of the sweetest chickens you can possibly have. They're nice personalities. The downside to Barred Rocks is they have a very elaborate comb, which tends to get frostbitten quite a bit in the wintertime. The New Hampshires are very similar to the Rhode Islands. And there on the far right is a buff Chanticleer. The standard Chanticleer is a white chicken. I can't stand the thought of having a white chicken in Alaska because I'd never find it in the winter. Anyway, look closely at that Chanticleer. It's a hen, and you'll notice she has virtually no comb and virtually no wattles. So that's not something that can get frostbitten very easily. If you're raising your chickens for meat production, probably the meat factory would be the Cornish cross. Okay, the Cornish cross is the white chicken there on the left. They will actually eat themselves to death if you don't pull their food. You can take a Cornish cross from newly hatched chick to bird ready to go into the freezer in 6 weeks. They are literally protein producing machines. In fact, they can grow so fast they can break their legs from the weight gain. Some people want a little more, I'd call it an organic choice. Jersey Black Giants are good for that. Jersey Black Giants are really sweet personality birds. A lot of people begin raising them for food and then just can't bring themselves to, send them to the freezer. They get big enough that they get to the size of a small turkey, actually. So really good meat. Where do you get birds? Okay. For those of you here in Alaska, I like Alaska's list. It has a poultry section. Alaska's list is the Alaskan version of Craigslist, except everything that goes on Alaska's list is screened before it's placed on there. So, you know, I would never let, if I had a kid, I'd never let them go on Craigslist unsupervised, but they can go on Alaska's list because the list owner knows what's on there and has screened it. This time of year, the feed stores are all usually getting little chicks. Some of the pet stores like Pet Food Warehouse and things like that will sometimes carry them. Watch for classified ads. You know, well, I don't know who reads the newspaper anymore, but sometimes you'll find them in classified ads. Look on bulletin boards. Just the other day, I was in a store and I noticed on the bulletin board that a person was selling chicks. My preferred way to get new chicks is through catalogs and websites. Most of the hatcheries have all of their chicks for sale online. And believe it or not, they can mail chicks to you. What they do is they pack the chicks very tightly in a box so they stay warm and they overnight them. If you're going to have chicks mailed to you, you need to go to the post office and let them know the approximate date that they're coming so that they can be sure to call you as soon as the chicks come in. I don't know what the post offices are like in the towns where you all are from, but the post office in Palmer is notorious for having long lines. Well, let me tell you, if you've got an order of chicks in the back waiting for you to be picked up, they put you to the front of the line because you can hear those chicks peeping all over the post office. And of course, you can't help but just crack the box open and take a look in. And let me tell you, everybody in the puppies have nothing on baby chicks as far as attracting people. Finally, a fun thing to do is to hatch your own eggs, and we're going to talk briefly about that. Okay, what equipment do you need? I like to say that any good Alaskan has everything they need to raise chickens either in their front yard or their backyard. For those of you all that are not from Alaska, we are notorious for not getting rid of anything. So a lot of us tend to have a lot of junk in the front yard and in the backyard. So some of the things you're going to need, you'll need a heated waterer. If you're going to raise your chickens from chicks, you're going to need a brooder. That's something to keep them warm. You'll need a heat lamp to keep the chicks warm. They need shelter, and we're going to talk quite a bit about chicken coops here in a minute. You're going to need a water heater. What happens is the water will go on top of the water heater and keep it thawed in the wintertime. By the way, that water heater that you see on that slide right there runs about $70, which is a little pricey for my book. What you can do is go to Walmart and buy a heated dog water bowl. What you can do is turn it over and use a screwdriver to pry the back off of it. Once you have the back off of it, pull the heating element up, flip it over, glue the back on, turn it upside down, and you've got a great, inexpensive, about a $15 water heater that you can set your water on. And then I encourage people to get feeders that keeps the chicks from scratching most of the food out of the feeder and onto the ground where it's wasted. Okay, we're going to talk about chicken coops. The purpose of a chicken coop is to, in Alaska, keep the chickens warm, but most importantly is to keep them safe. A lot of people let their chickens roam free, and I like that, but the problem is sooner or later there's going to be a dog that's going to find your chickens and attack them. I know when I was a kid, I had a flock of 50 chickens that I was raising for 4-H, and a neighbor's dog got into my backyard and killed all 50 of them just because it was fun. So the main purpose is protection. Here, you can make chicken coops out of just about anything. I like this one because, as it indicates, it's a chicken coop. You can buy elevated chicken coops like this, where the chickens roost in the protected part, and then they've got a run down in the bottom. These are, you can purchase these pre-built. they're a little pricey. I think maybe I should go into the chicken coop building business. This coop here sells for about 1,200 bucks. Some people were asking in email before the program, where can I get kits? Coops and kits are in short supply in Alaska right now because everybody is getting into the raising chickens. So what I would do is get on the internet and Google chicken coop design, and there's a million different plans out there. One of my favorites is the chicken tractor. This is a chicken coop that can be lifted up and rolled on wheels. A lot of organic farmers use a chicken tractor because they can move them each day, and the chicken poop fertilizes the areas where they're going to grow. This is great for your chickens because now they're protected and they can't get away, but they have access to insects and grass and other foods like that. One of the neat things about one of the important things of any coop design is it should be easy to clean, okay, and it should be easy for you to access the eggs. Here's a chicken coop that I'm building. It's a pretty standard one. This is one that would be good if you're off the grid in Alaska. You can keep chickens in cold areas like Fairbanks unheated if you really pack them into this coop. If this was an unheated coop, I would probably put about 5 to 6 birds in here in the wintertime so that they can squeeze together and keep each other warm. This coop is about half built. You can see inside I've got the 2x4 studs in there. The next thing I'm going to do is take styrofoam insulation and place it in between those studs and in the ceiling. Now I will cover that insulation with a sheet of plywood, and that'll keep the chickens pretty warm in there. I think I talk about this a little bit later. It's important to keep them warm, but it's also very important not to keep them sealed up. Believe it or not, in the wintertime, the #1 killer of chickens is not the cold, it's ammonia buildup from chicken coops being too tight, and the ammonia in the chicken poop suffocates the birds. Okay, my chicken coop is actually a horse stall in my barn, okay? What I do is, if you look there, the picture on the right, okay, there's a large door with a smaller door for the chickens. The large door is for me to access the coop and to easily clean it out, okay? Outside of that is their fenced-in run, and it's fenced pretty much on all sides. I'll talk about this again, but if you look at the picture on the left, you'll notice that I've got, for their perch, I don't have round perches. I have flat perches about 6 inches wide. This is the secret to chickens keeping their toes in the wintertime. When they lay down on that flat perch, their toes are spread out and their breasts will keep their toes warm, okay? If you look down on either picture, you'll notice that the floor of the coop is completely covered in wood chips. I use something called the deep litter method. I don't clean out my coop every week. I clean it out about twice a year. What happens is, as the manure builds up, I'll go in and I'll shovel it evenly around the coop, and I'll add more wood chips. For those of you all that have access to cheap wood pellets for wood pellet stoves, I haven't tried it yet, but I've heard wood pellets are a cheaper alternative to wood chips. I don't recommend that you use sawdust because sawdust can irritate the chicken's eyes and their sense of smell. So anyway, to wrap up on chicken coops, they should be designed for protecting the chicken, for warmth, for good ventilation, and ease of cleaning. Okay, getting hens to lay. In Alaska, well, chickens are tropical creatures, okay? They don't belong in Alaska, and they need 15 to 17 hours of light to lay. Hey, let me remind everybody, please mute your microphones. because when you adjust your screen, we can hear you. So anyway, starting about October in Alaska, we're not getting enough daylight to stimulate the hens to lay, so we have to provide artificial light. What you need is a light that's bright enough that you can read a newspaper anywhere inside of the coop. Oh, someone needs to mute their mic, please. So anyway, if you're not feeding your chickens commercial chicken feed, you'll probably want to provide them oyster shell so that they get enough calcium to have good thick shells. As far as nesting boxes, the picture on the right, those are 3 nesting boxes. The secret formula for those are about 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot. The chickens like it cozy like that. This box could serve up to probably 10 chickens. What's funny is if you look at the nest box on the right, okay, for some reason, a flock I had a few years ago, they loved that box on the right. And there'd be 3 hens in there at once trying to lay an egg. I think your nest box needs to be elevated off the ground high enough that the hens can't look into the box. The reason for that is a big problem with hens is once they discover that eggs taste good, they'll start pecking the eggs. And once that happens, you'll never figure out who it is that's pecking the eggs. Well, if you keep the eggs out of sight in that nest box, they're less likely to be tempted to peck it. Okay, right quick, I just want to talk about laying biology. The egg is developed inside the chicken and comes out through the vent. The vent is used by the intestines as well as laying the egg. It's referred to as the cloaca. Okay. The main reason I show this is there's a big debate about whether you wash eggs or don't wash eggs. The reason people say you should wash eggs is because eggs will get manure on them, okay? And there's the potential for E. coli contamination. The people that, and that's why people say wash the eggs. The people that say don't wash the egg, well, both camps are correct, by the way. The people that say don't wash the eggs are correct because they say that water will drive the bacteria into the egg because the eggshell is very porous. That's true. So the secret is wash your eggs in water that's hotter than 90 degrees, and that will seal the eggs up. Forgive me, I have to step away from the camera just for a moment. My wife left the cooking on. And in case you're interested, we're having ravioli when this is over tonight. Okay, we're going to talk briefly about incubating eggs. If you've never done it, it's a really fun thing to do at least once. It's a great thing to do if you have kids. You can build your own incubator. The picture on the right there is a styrofoam ice chest incubator. You can heat it with a light bulb or heat tape or something like that. Install a little thermostat. Again, if you Google homemade chicken egg incubator, you'll find all kinds of plans for that. On the left is a purchased chicken egg incubator. If you have a choice, get a forced air incubator because the temperature inside of those is much more uniform. Also consider getting an automatic egg turner. Well, unless you have little kids, get an egg turner because the eggs will need to be turned 2 to 3 times a day. But I don't know what it is, little kids love to turn those eggs. I think it's fun for about the first time and then let someone else do it. Okay, if you're going to incubate eggs, it's very important to take a pencil and write the date on the egg when you put it in the incubator. Ideally, all the eggs would go in at the same time, but if you're collecting the eggs from your own flock, you may have eggs in there that span several days or possibly even a week or more. Eggs will hatch in 21 days, plus or minus 1 or 2 days, okay? If an egg gets out to day 24 and it hasn't hatched, it's not going to hatch. You incubate the eggs at 100 degrees for a forced air incubator and 102 degrees for a still air incubator. It's very important that for the first 18 days, you have 50% humidity in the incubator and 70 to 80% after that through hatching. Turn the eggs 3 times a day, okay, and then stop turning on day 18 so that the little chick knows which way is up. Okay, I can't emphasize how important the proper humidity is. If you have too much humidity, the chick will drown at hatching because not as much of the fluid in the egg will have evaporated. If you have too little, the chick will dehydrate and die. So a lot of times people will ask me, you know, I got out today 24, 25, nothing happened, so I cracked open the egg and there was a fully formed chick in there. Well, oftentimes either the chicken or the chick dehydrated and died, or when it because it had too much humidity, when it pecked through the little egg cell or the little air cell at the top of the egg, it drowned because there was too much fluid. Okay, if you're going to hatch eggs, it's a good idea to candle them after day 3. Candling is where you take a bright light and look to see evidence of a circulatory system. Okay, in this particular case, there's a day 3 egg and a day 9 egg. And if you look very, very closely, you can see the heart that is formed and the developing circulatory system. It's important to candle on day 3 because if you don't see any evidence of a circulatory system developing, you need to get rid of that egg. And you want to do it again on day 9 to make sure the development is continuing. It's normal to get about a 50 to 75% hatch rate. If you're going to be using eggs that have dark shell colors, you can buy special egg candlers with different color light that can shine through that shell. Okay, it's day 21 and your chicks are hatching. Let them dry in the incubator until they're nice and fluffy. Don't be in a hurry to water or feed them. They're hatched out with a 3-day food supply already within them. That's how they can be mailed to you. And you know, let's say there's a problem with the mail and it takes 2 days to get there, they're still fine. Oh, I think I've got a slide on this. Anyway, if you live in the city of Anchorage and maybe even the city of Fairbanks or Seattle or places like that, they'll allow you to keep a certain number of hens, but usually no roosters. I know in Anchorage you're allowed to keep up to 5 hens, but no roosters. Well, let's say you hatched out your own chicks. You need to know who's a rooster and who is not, okay? You can use something called wing sexing to determine whether or not it's a male or a female. This doesn't work with all breeds, but it works with many. What will happen is, if you look at the picture on the left, the male chicks, the ends of the feathers will all be the same length. Whereas on female chicks, every other feather will be shorter than the one next to it, okay? There's some other ways to sex chicks by looking at their vent, but that is a really, really difficult skill to obtain. If you get on Google and search for determining chicken sex, you can find videos on that on YouTube. Okay, you got the chicks out of the incubator. You want to brood them at about 90 degrees. And it's very important for the first few days that you do not place the chicks on a smooth surface. Many people are tempted to put their chicks on newspaper. Well, what happens is when they're newly hatched, their bones are still very soft. And if the chick's legs slide out from under them, they can develop a condition called spraddle leg. and it'll essentially kill them unless you're going to push them around in a little chicken wheelchair for the rest of their lives. So I would suggest using something like hay or straw to put them on. Wood chips works great too. I encourage you to introduce them to your pets so that your pets realize that those chicks are part of the family. Some more on brooding chicks. As they develop their feathers, you can lower the temperature about 5 degrees each week. The chicks will tell you whether they're warm enough or cold enough. If they're cold, they will huddle underneath the brooding lamp in a very tight circle. If they're too hot, they'll huddle around the edges in a big hollow circle, trying to stay cool. So adjust your lamp accordingly. Newly hatched chicks need about 10 square inches of space each. Up to 8 weeks, they need 1 square foot of space. And then adult birds need 2 to 3 square feet thereafter. Now, that 2 to 3 square feet is minimum amount of size in a coop. If you were raising these in an unheated location off the electrical grid, I would drop that down to about 2 square feet per bird so that they can keep each other warm. The important thing is do not let any wet spots occur in your brooder. A wet chick is a death sentence for a chick in most cases because it'll weaken their immune system and allow diseases like coccidiosis to take the chick. So one of the things, if you've got a waterer in their brooder, or let's say you're using a water pan, the little chicks will gravitate towards that water like magnets. What you can do to keep them from getting soaked in it is to put pebbles or marbles in there so that they can only get their beaks in between the marbles to get a drink and not their whole body. Okay, let's switch gears and talk nutrition. This is an outdated slide up until, I don't know when they instituted it, maybe a few months ago, maybe a year. You could buy pre-medicated chick crumbles. Well, that is no longer possible. You can't buy pre-medicated chick crumbles anymore, even though some of the bags that are still out there say they are. It is illegal. If you want medication, a prophylactic medication for your chicks, you have to get a prescription from your veterinarian now. So it becomes more important than ever to keep things clean. Okay, and I already told you about putting the marbles in the water. So if you're buying commercial feed, you have 3 choices. You can get it as a mash, you can get it as crumbles, and you can get it as pellets. For chicks, I recommend starting them out as crumbles, and when they get big enough, switch them over to pellets. For whatever reason, chickens don't waste pellets as much as they do mash or crumbles. Usually they will ask you, do you want 16% or 20% protein? This seems counterintuitive, but you want 16% protein for your chicks if they're going to be layers. If you're raising your chicks for meat, you want 20% protein. The reason you want less protein for a chick that's going to be a layer is you want their reproductive system to develop a little bit slower because you'll get higher quality eggs. And you do that by giving them less protein when they're young. If your chicks and chickens don't have access to the outdoors, you'll need to provide grit for them. Grit allows their gizzard to crush up the food that they eat. You can buy grit at the feed store, which whoever came up with that scheme is probably a millionaire somewhere because you've got probably unlimited sources of grit. Just go out in your garden and dig up some dirt and provide it to the chickens. And again, if you're not feeding them commercial feed, say you're feeding them kitchen scraps, or in the summertime, my birds really like chickweed, you'll need to supplement their feed with oyster shell, and you can buy that at the feed store. Here's how I handle my feeding. This is my feeder in my coop. I put it on top of a cinder block, and the reason I do that is so it's about breast high to an adult bird, and that helps reduce them getting up there and scratching in the feed pan. Chickens naturally want to scratch things because they're looking for food and they're hoping to uncover insects. And that same instinct applies to this feeder. So elevating it will help reduce that. If you look at the very top of that feeder, you'll see some white flecks in there. That's the oyster shell that I've placed in there. I like really, really tough eggshells, so I supplement mine with oyster even though I don't have to. What you don't see in this picture is I have a cone-shaped cover that I put on top of this because many of the hens will try to roost in there, and when they roost in there, they end up pooping in it, and that's not a good thing. So the cover keeps them from roosting on it. Okay, disease and parasites. Probably the biggest disease you have to be concerned with is coccidiosis. It's present in all birds, kind of like all humans have E. coli in our intestines. The key is finding ways to not trigger it. So anyway, coccidiosis is a digestive tract disease in chickens. It's characterized by loose droppings in what appear to be tired-looking birds. Younger birds are more susceptible. Usually an older bird can get coccidiosis and with antibiotics can get over it. With little chicks, it's almost always a death sentence. Again, the key is cleanliness and dryness. And I've got to update this slide because medicated crumbles are no longer available it used to be you could go to the feed store and buy all of the different medicines that you wanted or needed for your chicks, and now you have to have a prescription from your vet. Here's what coccidiosis looks like. The little chicks will look tired and unkempt. These little chicks probably only have an hour or two to live. In adult birds, it's characterized by green, dull green colored droppings that are watery. Here, I don't know if you all remember, what was it, probably 3, 4, maybe 5 years ago, we had that summer that it just rained and rained and rained and rained. And I couldn't keep anything in dry. And I went out and checked on my chickens in the morning, and by the afternoon, we had lost about 30 birds to coccidiosis. Other diseases to be aware of, fowl cholera. You can see their wattles are swollen up from that. Bronchitis. The big one that we always worry about is Newcastle disease. They'll have very bright neon green diarrhea. If you suspect Newcastle disease, you need to give me a call and I'll be in touch with the state veterinarian because that's an extremely serious disease. In big poultry raising states like Arkansas, if your farm gets Newcastle's disease, they'll come in and they'll kill every bird because they don't want it to spread to other farms. That's not as big an issue in Alaska because our poultry industry usually, the big operations consist of a few hundred birds, not hundreds of thousands. So anyway, fowl pox, they'll develop skin lesions on their comb. That can be easily confused with frostbite. Frostbite on chicken combs looks just like those little black spots on the bird you see there, but usually it'll be more towards the end of the comb than in the middle of it. If you're going to exhibit your chickens at fairs or shows, it's very important that they be vaccinated. In fact, I don't think most fairs will even allow you to enter if you don't have proof of vaccination. You can vaccinate your birds yourself, but again, you're going to have a prescription from your vet. Other disease and parasites. If you allow hens to raise their own chicks, let's say she lays 1 egg a day and she's got a clutch of 12 eggs. That first chick to hatch is going to be underneath mom for 11 to 12 days. And that little chick will be essentially pressed down to the ground. Well, what can happen as it poops, its little vent can become pasted with manure. So what you can do is you can get it under some warm water and wash the paste off If it's really, really bad, you can use mineral oil to soften it up and save the little chick. If you don't do something about it, it will kill the chick. Other diseases that are quite common are mites and lice. Usually, most people don't know they have mites or lice until they bring the chicken to a fair and the entry judge inspects it and discovers it. Okay. The way you can look for them, look around the vent area. The mites and lice like the warm moistness of the vent, and you can see them crawling around. Also look underneath their wings and at the base of feathers. If you do have lice, you can buy insecticidal dusts that contain 7 or malathion in them that you can sprinkle around the coop, and it'll get rid of the problem literally overnight. Now, some people are like, well, I want to be organic. I don't want to use those chemicals. What you can do is use diatomaceous earth. Diatomaceous earth essentially cracks the shell of the mites and lice, and they basically dehydrate. Diatomaceous earth is a better preventative than it is a curative. So I would recommend using diatomaceous earth, sprinkle it around the coop before you have a problem. Other problems that we see, particularly in Alaska, is impacted eggs. That's where the egg won't come out, okay? We used to have a real problem with it in Alaska, especially among the Banty breeds. The Banty breeds are the small-sized chickens, okay? And what we eventually discovered is it's a vitamin K deficiency. So what you can do is you can buy vitamins for your birds that you place in the water, and they get a dose of vitamins. It's not a bad idea to do that anyway. I have on this slide, see a vet. Almost no vets in Alaska will deal with chickens. The reason for that is you take a chicken in with an impacted egg, and before you know it, you got a $200 vet bill, and the chicken died anyway. So many of the vets have told me that, you know, they've been stiffed for the 200 bucks. If you really, really, really need to talk to a vet, send me an email. I know a vet student, his name's Jason Dahl in Massachusetts. He's about to graduate. He spent his summer up here 2 summers ago working with chicken owners across the state. And someone who's on here right now emailed me today, and we were emailing Jason back and forth. And he's especially partial to Alaskans, and I don't think he'll charge you anything. Molting, okay, all hens will molt. They begin molting anywhere from 9 months to 1.5 years. It's basically where the hen's reproductive system takes a little break for about 3 months. She'll lose a lot of her feathers because she's replacing those feathers. Molting is usually triggered by shorter days and cold temps. So if you keep artificial light on your hens to keep them laying through the winter months, that will actually hold off molting till kind of the last moment. The thing about molting is once they go through a molt, they'll never lay as many eggs as they did before. And each successive molt, they'll lay fewer and fewer eggs. Now, for a lot of people, fewer eggs is a good thing. And for a lot of people, fewer eggs is a bad thing. So what you can do is you can watch like Alaska's list and see if someone's got older birds that they want to get rid of. You know, let's say you're a couple and you just can't handle an egg a day from 2 chickens. Well, an egg that gives you 2 or 3 eggs a week might be a better thing. Rooster Spurs, okay? I used to say a rooster is not necessary for a home flock, but I've changed my mind on that, especially since I moved to Alaska. Roosters are important because they pretty much set the social order of the flock, okay? The rooster is in charge. I would encourage you to get a rooster. 2 roosters is a problem because if they don't establish the dominance pattern, they'll always be fighting. Here's the thing about roosters. They grow spurs, okay? And those spurs can be really dangerous, especially for little kids. What happens if you have an aggressive rooster that attacks you, what they do is they jump up and they fling their legs in front of them and they try hitting you with those spurs. If you have a little kid, okay, that's a recipe for that kid to lose an eyeball. So if you have an aggressive rooster, get rid of it if you have little kids. Now, for those of y'all that were here at the very beginning and I showed you that picture of my famous rooster Con, as he got older, he got pretty aggressive and he would attack me when I would come in the coop. And you're going to think I'm making this up, but it's true. What I would do is I would grab him and I would put him underneath my arm, and in front of all of his girls perched there in the coop, I would go to him and I would say, "Oh, Con, you're such a cute little rooster, nice little rooster." And I would just humiliate him in front of his girls. And you know what? It would work for like about 2 weeks. He'd be so embarrassed at that that he wouldn't attack me. Well, anyway, let's say you have a rooster that's aggressive, but you don't want to get rid of him. Don't be tempted to take like wire cutters and cut that spur off, because that is actually part of the rooster's leg bone. What you can do is file the sharp end off, or use a Dremel tool to file it down. Don't file it down much, but just enough to get that razor sharp tip off the end of it. Okay, cold weather and chickens. As I said before, well, let me back up because I didn't say it. Chickens are tropical birds. They don't like snow. My birds have access to the outside, and when the snow flies, they are not interested in going in the snow at all. So when that happens, you can seal up the outdoor run on your coop if you like. For your coop, it's important to insulate the sides and especially the roofs. You want to have it in an area that's protected from wind. And as I said before, you want to eliminate drafts but maintain good ventilation. The way you know you have good ventilation is if you don't see ice crystals build up on the sides of the coop. If you see ice crystals, you need to loosen up the vents a little bit more, and so that you don't see the ice crystals. As I said before, you want flat perches instead of round perches so that their breasts keep their toes warm. In my coop, I have a heat lamp that shines on the perch, and I think I've got a picture of that here in a minute. If it's going to be really, really cold and you've got a showbird and you want to protect their combs and wattles, you can rub them with Vaseline and that'll protect them from frostbite. That's a good picture of the flat perch right there. That's Con, actually. And if you look at his comb on top of his head, when I first got him, he had a very elaborate pointed comb. And over the years, frostbite just smoothed his comb out. There's the picture I was looking for. Here's my winter setup. You see the red heat lamp that's shining on the perch. It's about 70 degrees if you get into that lamp. So if there's a chicken that's cold, it can get in the lamp and warm up. This coop, a couple of times got down to minus 20 degrees. None of the birds lost any toes or anything like that. So chickens are actually quite adaptive. If you allow your flock to gradually descend into winter, they will become winter hardy birds. But let's say you have a chicken that you've kept in a 50-gallon aquarium in your living room. And believe it or not, there's a lot of 50-gallon aquarium chicken coops in the living room in Anchorage. I've seen them. Some people claim that the chicken is far more interesting than what's on TV. Well, anyway, this way, if you basically, what I call that hardening them off, allow them to gradually adjust, rather than suddenly plunging them into a cold environment, they'll do just fine. Okay, a little bit of chicken psychology. We're almost done here. It's really, really important to play with your chicks. And the reason for that is you want them to become hand friendly so that they don't run from you. Okay, and that's accomplished by playing with them. Another thing you can do too, what my wife and I do is whenever we go in the coop, we get a scoop of cracked corn and give it to them, so they associate us with that. Cracked corn is like candy to a chicken. And so what can happen if I'm out gardening, I like to let the chickens run free because I can watch over them. And when I want to gather them back up, I go get that scoop, and they see that scoop and they come running. Okay, and then I can get them back in the fence. As far as we talk about dominance behavior in hens and roosters, okay, like I said, it's a good idea to have a rooster because the hens then kind of know their social order. Without a rooster, the hens, you can have a hen that becomes very, very dominant and tries to take the place of a rooster. As far as keeping different age birds apart, it's best if your entire flock is all the same age and acquired at the same time. It is really, really rough if you introduce a new bird to an existing flock. That bird will just be pecked and pecked and pecked and beaten up. And it will most likely never really be part of the flock. I mean, it's with the flock, but it's always on the perimeter. Now, sometimes you don't have a choice. You've got to take a chicken that's a different age. Sometimes this works. I'll go in at night with a headlamp on, make sure the chickens can't see me at all, and I'll take the new bird and I'll nestle it on the perch with all the other birds. And if you're lucky, in the morning when they wake up, they're like, well, she's always been here. And they'll accept her right off the bat. As far as pecking, feather pecking, there's some things you can do about that if you get feather peckers. Brood with red lamps, warm with red lamps. Don't overcrowd the birds. If feather pecking gets to be a real problem, you can basically buy, well, essentially they're dresses that you put on the chicken to protect it. You can also buy bitter tasting salve that you can paint on the chicken so that whoever's doing the pecking will associate that purple salve with that bitter taste. Here's some chicken resources. Backyardchickens.com is probably one of the largest chicken websites on the internet. Just be careful the information that you get off there. It's not always correct. I know a lady that lived in Eagle River was about to kill her entire flock because she found on backyardchickens.com that her chickens have some terrible, terrible disease. Well, fortunately, she got hold of me before she did that, and it turns out her chickens didn't have any kind of disease. They had just gone broody, okay? And so what happens when they're broody, they stay on the nest all day, and they only get off once or twice, and when they do, they have these gargantuan poops. And she thought that was an indication of some kind of disease. Well, anyway, another great website is extension.org. Anything you get on extension.org is from the land-grant agricultural universities across the nation and territories. Anything that's on there has been peer-reviewed, and there's lots of good chicken information on there. If you've got kids, get them signed up in 4-H. I know when I was 8 years old, I found a duck egg, and I told my grandmother about it, and she said, well, go to the county courthouse and find the 4-H agent and ask her what to do. Well, I did that, and I ended up becoming a member of 4-H, and that was my first 4-H project. And wouldn't you know, I'd end up, well, every other state has a state extension specialist who probably has multiple PhDs in poultry science. In Alaska, to be the state extension poultry specialist, which I am, you just have to have been an 8-year-old who did a poultry 4-H project. So anyway, here's my contact information. This presentation has been recorded, okay, and will be available. If you send me an email tomorrow morning, I can send you a copy of the link where it's located. It will eventually be on our YouTube website, so you can view it again or let friends view it. Well, for those of y'all that are outside the state, Alaska's area code is 907, and my phone number is 745-3639. And for those of you that are on the phone, again, it's 907-745-3639. My email is scbrown, the number 4, at alaska.edu. And for the benefit of those on the phone, it's S as in Sierra, C as in Charlie, Brown, BROWN, the number 4, at alaska.edu. Again, that's scbrown4 at alaska.edu. And let me say this, I did a program yesterday on greenhouses, and I had about 50 emails waiting for me this morning. If I don't get back to you quickly, don't be insulted. Usually it's not one email that I have to respond to, it's multiple emails from the same person. I enjoy doing it, but it does take time. Right now, because of the hunker down command, I'm at home and not at my office. The number you see there is my direct line at the office. It's being forwarded to my cell number. If you call me and you get my voicemail, be sure to leave your phone number, because your number will not appear on my phone. My office number will. So what I would recommend that you do is, at the beginning of your message, give me your phone number and give it to me slow, and then leave a message and I'll call you back. If for some reason I don't call you back, it means that I didn't get all of your phone number. Sometimes with cell connections, there'll be a blip and I don't get the entire number, okay? So that's it for tonight. Thank you all for showing up. I really appreciate it. It looks like we had at one point about 165 people on here. I wish I could put everybody on audio so I could learn where you're from, but hopefully if I don't know you, I'll meet you and introduce yourself and let me know that you were in the class. So have a good evening and have fun raising your chickens.